Hey, what's up, guys? Blue Lightning here. So, we're gonna talk today a little bit about the problems with the ban list and with competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, let's start off by saying that a lot of players, a lot of a lot of my a lot of the players at locals, they have the mindset that you got to build a deck a certain way. You got to have these cards. You absolutely have to have this card, this card, and this card. That's not the case. You don't have to spend or drop hundreds of dollars on like Ash Blossoms or I don't know, like Snake Eyes or something. Like, that's not needed. Like, even if you're overly competitive and you want to be good, you don't have to play the best deck in the format or like the best like five. A lot of the ban list seems to affect the decks, especially like the older decks. And a lot of players, they ignore this fact, either because they can or they don't want to accept that the ban list does affect people like players, and it affects the way we play the game. Sometimes it's not even a skill issue, which a lot of players, they say, oh, you can't win all the time because it's a skill issue. It's not the case. First of all, in order to really, depending on the deck you're playing, a lot of decks, they don't have enough support and they don't have a lot that they can do. Like, sometimes like their gimmicks are just like one-sided. For example, Smorg. The ban list hits Smorg pretty hard. Their gimmick is focusing on spells and trap removal. They don't have a monster like built-in monster removal or negation. It would be nice to have that, and even if Smorg was at full power and someone continuously lost with it, it's not necessarily a skill issue. That right there is more of not having the cards, or the even the stuff that's on the ban list. Like, the two cards that got hit were pretty, for that specific deck, that hit was pretty hard. The Bird of Sovereignty and Barrier Statue of the Wind. Now, if you have a deck like Dinosaurs, they don't have enough support. Like, they don't have utility. A lot of decks, they have come out with like counter traps for their specific like archetype or their deck, like Heroes. Heroes are one of the best supported types in the game. They didn't need a counter trap, but they have one. So naturally, like Dinosaurs and other cards should have a counter trap that either locks them into that specific archetype, or they have to control in that instance, a dinosaur. And she counters spell, trap, and monster effects, not just one or the other. Unless that deck, like, again, like Samorg or something that's based around that gimmick. Like Glad Beasts, it's one of the rare older decks that has like 2 or 3 different counter traps to stop spell, trap, and monster effects. Other decks that has like 1 counter trap that can stop spell, trap, and monster effects. Now, with like Dinosaurs, you also don't have level 4 and lower. It needs more level 4 and lower effect monsters, because a lot of the ones that are already existing are decent, but they don't really do much. Like, Dinosaurs have a Searcher. Everybody knows that. dinosaurs can be splashed in. Now, I've come up with something. I don't know if anybody else has. I've come up with like chaos dinosaurs, combining the dinosaur theme with the chaos theme, and trying to stick with that theme can be pretty hard because there's not a lot of light and dark dinosaur monsters, and the ones that are the only ones that are good. And like, prime example, Oviraptor is a good dark target. Now they have a decent light dinosaur that I think it's R Rex or Re-Rex or something, but it doesn't really do much of anything. Like, it doesn't search, it doesn't do anything. And a deck like dinosaurs also, and other archetypes, also need the ability to special themselves in Swollen Field, like Blackwings. Because a lot of times, depending on how you build the deck and whatever, they you just summon one and get the effect, or you don't get the effect and you have no way to get rid of it. Now back to, that was a little bit off topic. Now back to competitive play. Problems with a lot of competitive players, they think that they need, they think like the top 3 decks in format, you need to drop hundreds and thousands of dollars on these decks, or you're not good. That's not the case. You can't tell somebody they're not good because they don't play Snake Eyes, or they don't play Voiceless Voice, or like the top 5 meta decks. And personally, a lot of the cards that I don't care for, don't really like, is life point paying cards. Just because you have to get life point, you have to pay life points, and I find that to be a waste, because what happens if you pay all these life points to do a bunch of shenanigans and combos and stuff, and then your opponent stops you midway through, or they're playing like counter fairies or something. They're playing something that can counter pretty much everything you do, or just about, and they decide that, or they put up tons of negates, and your deck falls to like 2 or 3 cards, and you can't do anything, or they lock you down, and then they blow your stuff up, and then you're screwed, because in that instance, you paid all those life points, and you have no way to regain them. You have no way to get your resources back. The problem with that is one of the main problems with Yu-Gi-Oh! Competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Could be better with some adjustments to the ban list and with other tweaks. When it comes to the ban list, though, like I said, or stated at the beginning of this video, a lot of players dismiss and don't really, they seem to ignore that the ban list does affect players. People that say draw the out or get good, that's just an excuse. That's just trolling, and that's just being demeaning. Like, you can't do that to other players. Like, just because the opponent didn't win because of whatever reason, or because of, I don't know, because of a ruling or something, doesn't mean anything. Like, I agree, some players need to be able to accept they lost fair and square. When it comes to like rulings and stuff, that's another thing for competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! And Yu-Gi-Oh! In general. When it comes to rulings, a lot of players, they sit here and try to go by Master Duel. Master Duel has nothing on the TCG. mainly because it's a video game. Whether they have similar rules or not, they're not one and the same. You can't use Master Duel rules for the TCG because the TCG already has its own set of rules. And when it comes to cards versus, that was another point too, interpretation of cards. A lot of cards, they state specific things or specific requirements for cards to use their effects or to be activated. A lot of players, they misinterpret, and judges too. And people that want to say that judges rule and whatever, it does not matter because even the judges can be wrong. And if you find out that you lost because of a ruling, because it was supposed to be for you instead of against you, then I mean, you're the one that didn't want to believe it. So, when it comes to interpretation of cards, for example, like trick stars, the way they're worded, I honestly don't remember like a lot of them. I'd have to read them over again to give a good description, but their burn damage, like the way the cards are worded, even the basic rules go by the cards instead of the actual rulings. Because if you want to get technical, the rulings are only there for tournaments, and even then, they're not even that reliable. Henceforth, if they were that reliable, they'd only have like 1 or 2 judges, but they have like a system. When it comes to, sorry, we're going to be talking about the ban list quite often in this video. When I say the ban list affects people and players, you can do all this work to build a top tier meta deck that's supposedly really good, but when the ban list hits you, it's gonna hit you. Like tier elements, they were running rampant for a while, and they finally got hit several times. Everybody says bestials and everything. Sure, their effects are decent, but they're not broken to use them in every deck. And that's part of the reason why I don't use other cards that everybody's running. I'm not a sheep. Not saying that's good or bad. It can be good when you're learning and just starting out. But if you're a veteran player or you're wanting to change stuff up and like experiment, you don't want to be a sheep. You don't want to be net decking, or you don't want to be making somebody else's deck, because that's not original. You should have your own originality and your own twist to your deck. Granted, yes, take some ideas, take notes if you have to. Don't like overdo it. But if everyone's like running bestials, don't run bestials, because like if anything, side the bestials or side whatever, but don't be a sheep and just, oh, I gotta have this card, I gotta have that card, everybody's running it, it's good. And everybody else thinks that a card is good, like SP Little Knight. It's decent, but it's not broken good. It's not that good to put in every deck, whether a top player uses it or a mediocre player uses it. Doesn't matter if somebody that wins Worlds or YCS has it, like 5 people that run it. It does not matter. It is not that broken to where it needs to be in every single deck. Now, one card, a lot of people might disagree with me on this, but a card I believe should be a staple in extra deck is Abyss Dweller. Pretty decent attack and defense. Not hard to summon at all. Kind of too easy to run over, but stops graveyard. It's not great, but it's not bad either. The other thing you want to take into account when you're building like an archetype deck, or you're considering ban lists, or you're considering competitive, or even in playing in general, a lot of archetypes nowadays, especially, the deck locks you out of like certain things, or they lock you into certain things. They also have steep requirements so that the deck's not overpowered. I think that's why a lot of cards have decks have gimmicks, because they don't want these decks overpowered. But they also need to give decks like Element Sabers new support, better support. This is a classic example. Fire Fist and Element Sabers. Fire Fist, as we all know, they required you to pitch pitch a card in order, like a fire formation card, in order to use their effects. A lot of people didn't build it because of that restriction. Now, a lot of people, like me, I understand why, but it doesn't always mean that I have the resources to compensate for it. But anyway, with Fire Fist, they made a link monster, Eagle, to basically, that restriction goes away. Element Sabers, they only have 2 spells and traps. You also need to pitch Element Sabers. Now, granted, the field spell helps you out a lot by getting your Element Sabers to grave quick, but it's not enough. That's another thing. Besides support, they need to make these cards more powerful for the older decks. That way they can compete on equal footing, and also because they don't have enough to do much, if anything. But again, with Element Sabers, they need to make more spell and trap support, and they need to make a more powerful cost and not searching, but like counter traps. Now, some decks like Beat Trooper and Battle Wasp, they have a lot of support. I think sometimes too much support. Heroes, like, obviously, tons of support, too much. I love Heroes, but they have too much support. Dark Magician, Blue Eyes, Red Eyes. Well, Red Eyes doesn't have a lot of support, but I play Blue Eyes and Red Eyes. Blue Eyes and Dark Magician, way too much support. Konami doesn't understand that you need to make these decks, the older decks, and the competitive scene, and competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! And the ban list, they need to be balanced. This is not a good way to balance it the way it is right now, especially when you have like 3 or 4 or 5, between 3 and 5 decks being like topping. And just because the deck is topping, that's another thing. Just because the deck is topping does not mean it's good. Doesn't mean it's bad, but doesn't mean it's good. But you guys tell me what you guys think about competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! And just whatever in general. Like, tell me your thoughts and ideas. And what do you guys think that they should do to balance the game. Alright, smash that like button and subscribe. Catch you on the flip side.